Early life. Princess Sophia Charlotte was born in May 1744 in Germany as the second daughter of Duke Karl of Mecklenburg-Strelitz and his wife Elizabeth. Homeschooling, common among high-ranking aristocrats of her time, was given to Charlotte. She mastered the skill of fluent communication in French, along with her native German during her youth. Currently, special attention is focused on Charlotte's ethnicity, presenting her as a potential first black queen of Great Britain. This assumption has a certain justification, since Charlotte was connected by distant kinship with Martim Afonso Chicaru, the illegitimate son of the King of Portugal of the 13th century, Afonso III, the Queen of Britain. In 1761, King George III of Great Britain married Charlotte. The House of Hanover, to which George belonged, began its history in Germany, later turning into the British royal family. At the beginning of the marriage, Charlotte did not speak English, and the new royal abode felt alien to her. However, over time, the marriage turned out to be happy. Both spouses showed a keen interest in art, theater, music, and new scientific discoveries that were intertwined in the European life of that time. As the 1760s continued, Charlotte gradually mastered the English language, and she became increasingly involved in the role of queen consort. In moments of difficulty, she supported George, becoming his support and companion in many trials. The madness of King George III. Over time, the marriage with George became more and more complicated, but the reason for this is not in the breakup of the relationship, but in the mental state of George himself. In the 1780s, the king began to show signs of deteriorating health, periodically passing into states of mania when he spent hours vigorously communicating with everyone around. While the exact cause of George's illness remains a mystery, historians are most often inclined to believe that it was caused by liver disease, as a result of which toxins accumulate in the blood, poisoning the body, but not causing a fatal blow. This effect on the blood subsequently begins to have an effect on the brain. What was called King George's madness became a source of alarm for Charlotte, the royal family, and the government. However, this became a real state problem in October 1788, when George suffered a mental collapse, and the restoration of the king took several months. At this time, the government took steps to establish a regency board, according to which the eldest son of George III and Charlotte George was to become regent under his father. Following this, Charlotte, realizing that her son's ambitions exceeded concern for her father's condition, remained a loyal supporter of the king, often encouraging other members of the court to show loyalty to George even when his illness lasted. The well-deserved reward was the recovery of the king in the late spring of 1789. However, Charlotte's relationship with her son, as well as the king's relationship, remained unstable afterwards. Children. Unlike many previous queens of England, Charlotte did not suffer from any problems due to pregnancy and childbirth. In total, she had 15 children with George. What is more surprising, especially for that time, she did not have to survive either miscarriages or stillborn children. From 1762, when Charlotte became pregnant with her first child, George, until the mid-1780s, when she gave birth to her 15th child, Amelia, it can be said that she was almost constantly in a state of pregnancy. Among the 15 children that Charlotte and George brought into the world, 9 were boys and 6 were girls. Over the course of their lives, 13 of them have lived to adulthood, and it is important to note that 12 children have outlived both their parents, subsequent life and death. Despite the fact that the king recovered from a prolonged period of insanity in 1789, the following decades were also marked by new long and painful periods of painful attacks, in particular in 1801 and 1804. In 1810, the king finally left for another world, remaining in it forever, and Prince George became regent under his father. In 1811, George III was moved to a separate apartment at Windsor Castle, and for the last 9 years of his life, he lived in considerable isolation, communicating with people who had long since passed away, including his 2 deceased sons. Despite the fact that he lived until 1820, by that time he had lost his eyesight and completely lost the ability to live independently. Charlotte herself passed away before her husband, although by all indications, in recent years she lived as if she was already a widow. At the beginning of the first months and years after this event, she sought to maintain as much stability as possible in the governance of the country in the hope that George would be able to recover, as happened in 1789. However, as time went on, it became clear that his health was not improving, and she increasingly focused on helping her eldest son to become regent under his father. Interestingly, despite the fact that 12 of her children lived to adulthood, Charlotte had only one grandson during her lifetime. Charlotte died on November 17, 1818, when she was 74 years old, and her body is buried in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. She spent 57 years and 70 days in the role of the Queen Consort of Great Britain.